You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, I am delighted to welcome Chris Brown. If you open your liner notes for Potemkin City Limits, you will find the credits page reads Geordie Boy Horkoff, drums and backing vocals, The Rod, bass and vocals, Glenn Lambert, guitar and vocals, and Chris Brown, clavinet, hammond, mechanical, crab crawling up your face on tracks 2, 5, and 12. This is that Chris Brown. Chris and I connected because Propaganda ran into him while on their September 2025 Canadian tour in Kingston, Ontario. I reached out to him, and he is here to tell you about his love of the band, his collaborations, and some of his other favorite tunes. Please enjoy my conversation with Chris Brown. Chris Brown, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Oh man, it's such a pleasure to be here.
I am delighted. Thank you. So Chris, I have been familiarizing myself with your work the last several days since you and I connected. Just for anybody out there who isn't familiar with your body of work in music, why don't you go ahead and give yourself just a little introduction to the listeners out there so they know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right. I grew up, I started playing piano when I was like 2. I have a sister who's 3 years older than me, so we can start there because she started playing piano and I would imitate her. And, so that led me into early music education. Like from the time I was 3 years old, I was doing piano lessons. And music was just always a fabric of my family and my life. And, so when I was a kid, I was at like St. Micah's Choir School and did the conservatory and all that. And then I formed this band in high school called the Bourbon Tabernacle Choir, and consequently never finished high school because we were already working. And it was interesting because I'd grown up, both playing rock and roll and jazz and R&B and hip hop and all the stuff that I loved off the radio, and then also being educated in music. I never thought, oh yeah, you're not going to finish high school, but music just kind of took over. And I always continued with mentors and teachers of all genres anytime I could find them, and still do. So the Bourbon stayed together for 10 years. It was formed when we were teenagers, kind of dumped us out of that in our 20s. And Kate Fenner, who was a singer in that band, and I just stayed in New York, and we made records out of New York for like the next 15 years. Toured a lot, put together, started working with Tony Shear largely, and others in the city, and kind of formed a music community in New York that was also a bit of a open door for all the Canadians that would come through touring. And our place in Brooklyn kind of became this embassy where, after being like 10 years solidly touring Canada back and forth, being pulled out of the Canadian music scene, we were still really connected to it because of that aspect of things. And then I guess just leaping ahead, I now live on Wolf Island, which is just offshore of Kingston. I have a music studio here. We have a little music label called Wolf Island Records for all the stuff we produce. And then we also have the hotel here, which is now 4 music venues and a farmer's market and a locally focused restaurant and multidisciplinary arts center. It's still a hotel, but we really partner with Lodgepole, which is the Mohawk Arts Alliance that shares this address with us. And we welcome folks from around the globe doing multidisciplinary artistic endeavors,
That is absolutely amazing. That sounds like such a cool thing that you've got going on right now as well. Cool, and I like that. I got to meet your cat too, because you and I both have tuxedo cats. So
yeah, I've got 3 tuxedo cats currently, and 1 orange guy with them. So I got 4. I'm down from 8. A few of them aged out, but yes, cats are have been a major, major theme all of my life, and they're so entwined in music. So I love that Cat Guy's on the new record.
Yeah. Okay, so you got Bourbon Tabernacle Choir, and then in like the mid 90s, I start seeing a lot of session work, like recognizable names, like, Bare Naked Ladies, Ani DeFranco start popping up. I was looking at some of your list. Where does session work kind of come in for you as well?
Well, because I am a pianist and organist and keyboardist and arranger, like it naturally evolved that, through being on the road and being exposed to people, that people would ask me to play organ or clavinet on their records. And that just kind of accelerated more and more into production to where I started producing a lot of artists. But yeah, all the folks you mentioned there, people like Ron Sexsmith and Ani DeFranco, Bare Naked Ladies, who I did a bunch of sessions with, and then actually ended up covering for Kevin Hearn, my dear friend, when he was dealing with leukemia and a stem cell transplant. I actually filled in with him for a year, which was an interesting ride. And then you did the same thing with the Tragically Hip as well. Played on their album Music at Work, and then Kate and I ended up touring with them for a year. And usually, what happens in these instances is I'll go on tour with I'll go on the road with the band. I'll be playing their sets, and then we'll be opening. So it's a way of me kind of continuing my creative life while supporting the music that others make as well. And it's been yeah, it's really interesting. And then since really being on the island full time, like people come here from all over to make records. So we end up, even through COVID, we end up producing a lot. But yeah, session work. I mean, I've played on hundreds of albums.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, let's chat a little bit about propaganda. You are sort of an elusive figure to me because obviously I've been making this podcast for a long time, and it kind of amazes me that I never tracked you down in the past because of how relentless and detailed I've been on this podcast in the past. But it's so funny that when I open up the credits to the album Potemkin City Limits, you're listed right there, like with the three members of the band. And it's just like Geordie Boy, The Rod, Glenn Lambert, Chris Brown. So I think that I never tracked you down because Chris Brown just sounds like such a common name. And I was just like,
Right.
there's no way I'll be able to track this guy down. So it's amazing that we're here. But I would love to know just about your appreciation of Propaganda as a band. When did you first encounter them? What's your story and relationship with them as like a fan of music in general?
Um, well, I mean, among all the musics that I grew up listening to, I really, really loved early punk and the Clash, and I mean, it caught me young, and that there was no division for me between the way I listened to that music and the way I felt literally playing like Chopin or Bach. Like it was just translations of emotion. And if you paid attention long enough to anything to bother to understand someone's story, like you you can't deny what's there. And with Propaganda, it's so. I mean, I'm so happy to be on this podcast because I think that they are Zen. Like I think that they are firing on so many levels and have been for such a long time that it's such high art. And at the same time, so completely grounded and so reachable and approachable and something that young folks can totally grasp. The first time that I ever saw them live, I had just been knocked out at the Quebec City G8 summit. I'd been knocked out by the spray of tear gas and this stuff that they were shooting from cannons called chemical snow. And they were shooting this at peacefully gathered folks. I won't even call us protesters. We were there for talks by people like Maud Barlow and David Suzuki. And then there were agent provocateurs in the crowd dressed as, folks who were stirring trouble. And as soon as the trouble got stirred, in came the tanks. And I go down in the heat of all of this, and the next thing I know, I come to on the sidewalk, and a paramedic is flushing my eyes out
Hmm.
and splashing water in my face, and I'm hearing this incredible music. And in the haze of the tear gas, there is this band at the barricades playing. Guess who? Our heroes, right?
Wow.
And oh my God, was that moving because I was in an emotional state of despair for my country. I was living in New York at the time. I'd come up to Quebec to do this. Um, and I'm like, why are there American agents all over the place? This had been building. Naomi Klein had released No Logo during what was, later referred to as the Battle of Seattle. We'd seen, we'd seen the protests growing. Francois Mitterrand inside that summit said we're on the wrong side of history here. He said it in front of the galaxy. He said there's more people out there than in here. There's something wrong. And then to have this attack, like I was saying, it was a peaceful protest until that happened. And then not only did the people who had come from far and wide, but actually the locals started convening in the street. Um, so I answered that episode by putting together something called the GAS CD, which is Governments Accountable to Society and Citizens Equals Democracy. And Propaganda put Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes on it. That's where our relationship started. And then that was interesting because that album was back when we were still selling physical copies. So we would just send like 500 copies to Genoa, like 500 copies to Rome, 500 copies to Paris, like wherever there'd be an action, and people would sell it and just help to pay for the legal defense of these people who were being abused and arrested. And it was a very interesting project because we had Propaganda on there and Jelly Baffers on there, and then the Bare Naked Ladies and the Tragically Hip are on there. And Abbey Lewis and Naomi Klein did the liner notes. And heroes of mine, Nikki Giovanni and Gil Scott Heron, from the civil rights era and since are on there. And I felt like I was so kind of moved and devastated. I had to go into the fold of the music to really, for my own protection and understanding. But, Gil, for instance, when I was telling him about what happened with these agents provocateurs, he said, this is what would happen during the civil rights movement. We'd have a sit in, a teach in, and like a mile away, a car door or car window would get broken. And then that would be the rationalization for just the fucking cascade of violent state sponsored violence, right? I mean, does this sound familiar? Like what we're
Hmm.
witnessing right now?
Yeah.
And so I think it was heady times, and we did a number of shows. Bruce Coburn joined, um, and at that time, like Kate Fenner and I were touring, and the guys Propaganda came to our show at the Spectrum in Winnipeg, and then we were talking, and then that's when they asked me if I would do Potemkin City Limits with them.
Mm. Okay, so I actually did just find Gas CD on Discogs as well, and the track listing is really cool. They're Gord Downing, Jelly Afro, Bruce Coburn, Propaganda, Kate Fenner, Gil Scott Heron, Michael Franti, so David Suzuki. So there's a lot of really cool stuff on here, and people can actually find copies of it online if they wanted to buy it as well. Pretty sweet.
Yeah,
The
good.
Let's chat about the Potemkin City Limits. So, where did you record? Did you go out to Vancouver with Blair Calibaba?
I didn't. They sent me the tracks, and I recorded everything in Brooklyn. It was really sweet because they sent me I mean, it was such an honor for me. And also, as I said, I have an understanding of that music. Like so for me, a lot of the instrument that I played on that album sounds like a guitar. It's called a clavinet, right? And that's a 60 note keyboard with guitar strings in it. And I play it through an amp blown out. And so I was using that for a lot of the kind of harmonic overtone detail. But then I also played some organ on there, you know? And especially on like Bringer of Greater Things, where it felt like an elegy, and it felt like the organ. You know, I grew up playing organ, and it's used in so many contexts, hard and soft. And so I just did all that work, and my buddy Lurch helped me engineer it in Brooklyn, and then I sent it out to them. And then I got an email back that said, "Fuck." It was so great. Yeah, it was really,
Amazing.
yeah.
Okay, so did you record it like in your home studio in Brooklyn?
Yeah, but I mean, my home studio in Brooklyn was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Like it was the cat house, we called it, funnily enough, because there we had a lot of stray cats and that we fixed and fed. But yeah, so I recorded it at the cat house in Brooklyn.
Okay, so I know that you're accredited with clavinet and Hammond, and you're accredited on fixed frequencies, bringer of greater things, and iteration. Do you remember what you played on each one of those specifically?
Yeah, I kind of like on fixed frequencies, the clav, there's a lot of volume clav. There's a lot of like I was adding to, I was responding emotionally to the subject matter of the Middle East and the dissuasion and you know, t like so a lot of times when I'm choosing what I'm going to do musically, it has to do with you know, the emotional content of the song. If there's lyrics, it's like the lyrics will influence that. So I kind of make on that song, I kind of make these distorted clouds of clavinet because that to me, the distortions of what was being said about the Middle East and how people's instincts were being really messed with, as they always are, and that was being illustrated by that song. With the Bringer of Greater Things, I played clavinet and organ. Um, and that again, as I just mentioned, was because there was an elegiac feeling to that song, and the organ to me brought a little bit of that of that somber sense and the kind of funereal aspect of it, as well as just pushing hard. But that's also got some clav on it too. And then iterations was all I think was all clav. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. For anybody who doesn't have a honed ear for picking up organ or picking up clavinet in the songs, are there any like really standout moments in any of these songs that you could be like, "Oh, it's this is me," like for anybody who doesn't know what those sound like?
Well, I think in Bringer Greater Things, you can hear the organ glow, like let's say the latter half of the song, especially. You'll hear like these sustainant high register things. That's the organ. Um, the clavinet on all the songs is sometimes you don't distinguish it from a guitar, but
Right.
it's a very punchy, in this case, very blown out, distorted sound. And on is it which one is it? Not Bringer of Greater Things, not Iterations. What's the third one?
Fixed frequencies?
Fixed frequencies. Thanks. That's the where I'm doing a lot of volume stuff. So you hear those sounds kind of surging.
Mm,
That's what the clap sounds like. Ideally, when you're playing on people's work, you want it to mesh,
right.
right? Like sometimes, yeah, you step out, and there's certain points in those songs where I step forward, or actually, I think the very intro of Bringer of Greater Things is "You Will Hear Me" a lot. I think that intro
Wah,
is a lot
wah,
of
wah,
clavinet.
wah. Yeah.
That's me. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. That's it. And I think if memory serves that I just did that. I just felt that as an intro and sent it to them.
Amazing. Okay, so I was actually thinking that was probably you as well. And I actually sent a text message to my friend Paul earlier, and I was like, Paul, listen to the intro of Bringer of Greater Things. Is that a clavinet or a Hammond? And he's like, I think so. So I'm glad that it's on the record that it
Yeah,
has
it
been
is.
confirmed.
Yeah,
Okay. Yes. Very cool.
good ears. Good ears.
What model of Hammond were you playing? There's like M1 or B3. Do you remember any of those specific model
Yeah, no, I know
details?
what there was. That particular session was done on a C2, which is a classic console, like the kind that Jimmy McGriff played. Booker T. Like the A's, B's, C's, they're all the same size. It's just the cabinetry is a little bit different. Um, but it's a full console, two manual Hammond. If you look up a Hammond B3, that's what it looks like.
Very good. Okay, so Chris, I know that you just ran into those guys on tour the other day. I went to the two Toronto shows last weekend, and I'm still recovering to this day because I saw three shows in a row that week, and I was so exhausted for days. But tell me, when was the last time you saw them before last week?
The last time I saw them was around the time the Potemkin City Limits in Winnipeg when I was out there doing a gig. I hadn't seen them in a long time. So oh no, that's not true. After that album came out, I took my godson, who was I think 12 at the time, who lives on Wolf Island. They were playing in Kingston, and we went to that show. And it was one of Cohen's first concerts. And so that's the last time I saw them. So there was just that. It was just amazing to be in their presence, their warmth and their humility and all of that. So like just personally, you don't see people for a long time. You don't expect anything, but it was like there was no time had passed, man. It was so because I think the connect is it's so genuine. And for me, like, it would have been fine, like, oh yeah, Chris, but it wasn't like that. I mean, it was very deep and fast, and that felt really sane, you know. Then I would just say the experience of being around that music now, like, and I was saying to them that, they've always been really good. They've always been really tight. When he comes out with the Rainbow Rising shirt, and there's a mosh pit, and all these young guys are like getting it out, and he's saying, "Hands to yourself," and unless you're asked, right? And the music's so literally positive. I was saying to them, it's like it's a rite of passage. Um, that is really, really missing from a lot of young male culture, and that men are in so much trouble right now, because these aspects have been removed largely, and they've been substituted with personal gain, or this lottery system of late stage capitalism. I mean, it's we all know it's just a crazy death cult. To see those guys and all those young men moving like that, and to this music that was so positive in this container, like that was is so conscious, like it was so moving. It was so moving, and the band sounds better than ever. Like they're like they've gone into this other level where it is really zen, and they're totally owning the emotions in the room. There, which is again, as does Ron Carter when he plays bass. You know, there's a thing like, I had the pleasure when I lived in New York of skating, playing hockey with Wayne Gretzky. They weirdly, like, he'd invite me out to skate with the Rangers, which is another story. You can see there's a picture on my Instagram of it. But I realized when Wayne was on the ice, it felt like everything slowed down, and it's because he's not playing the puck, he's playing people's attention, you know and this is what masters do, right? Like, and we all have that mastery in our own lives. I think emotions, like when someone's dependent upon us and we are there for them, that same kind of instinct comes over where it's something outside of ourselves, and I feel that they're in that with their music. And it's a really, really, really great thing to behold, and especially right now at this moment in human history. Like, what a gift.
Yeah. Man, I wish that they would have known that you were going to be there and they could bust out a clav on stage and play
Right.
Bringer of Greater Things.
Yeah, maybe it'll happen in the future now that we've reconvened.
That is very cool. What did you think of the venue? I know that the venue they played in Kingston is like this tiny little place. I saw them in a huge place in Toronto, but you got to see them in this little itty bitty room.
Yeah, so the Broom Factory is an amazing art space. And so I'm sitting in Hotel Wolf Island, which is the aforementioned hotel that is for music venues on the island. The Broom Factory is an arts venue and we work really closely in partnership. They bring music of every genre through. They're also a community convening space. And Mark, who's the booker, is a huge fan. So that energy was just really, really part of it that night. Like there was nothing that wasn't intentional and accidental. And it was nice to be in this like real intimate space. And it was beautiful. It was great. And it sounded amazing, you know?
Amazing. Okay, cool. So let's chat about a couple of tunes. I made you choose some songs as well that I wanted to bring up because you mentioned that a couple of your other favorite songs were Rock for Sustainable Capitalism and At Peace. We kind of already touched on Bringer of Greater Things, but just for fun, tell me what you love about the song Rock for Sustainable Capitalism from the Potemkin LP.
Oh man, with a rebel yell, do exactly what you're told. you know um music was a sacred place and not just something bought and sold. And that beautiful kind of pleading, am I crazy, am I insane? It's rhetorical, because what it's saying is like, this is a sacred place, and they're giving that to the listener and to their audience and to the culture, right? They're not taking, they're giving. And that is the state of art, is giving. Okay. Of course we sell t-shirts, of course, because we have this crude tool called capitalism, which is the way we try to measure one another's time and value it, which doesn't do a very good job. But of course we engage. We're like, it's not, they're not martyrs yet. What is the imperative? The imperative is giving this thing. And by that song is so great because it's calling out the cynicism and the way, you know like, music's been marketed and has exploited its audiences. um, and then it's also, as an artistic piece, it's like it is giving people a safe space to gather where they're not being sold to, they're not being marketed, and their clicks are not being sold to some parent company, right? And like, it's tricky in music. And it doesn't mean that success is bad at all. And I know a lot of folks, a lot of my mentors have been very successful in music, but the kind of fiscal success that everybody sees is not the thing that has endured, you know? Like, when I was talking to Willie Nelson a few years ago, he was saying, like, yeah, I mean, at this point he was 80, and he was like, yeah, I make more money off of the royalties for Crazy every year than I do touring. It's like,
Hmm.
and there he is touring. Why is he touring? Because he wants to play music. He wants to give. And that song really, really cuts to that, because when he talks about the heart, they talk about the heartbreak at the end, like, oh, were we duped? You know, um, it's that thing of like, oh yeah, chasing something rather than being something, right? That's how I really connect to that one.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. And something about music too is something I'm experiencing now is uh the selling aspect. Whenever I do this podcast, it's free. Anybody can listen to it from anywhere in the world. And then after I interviewed members of the band more than 20 times, I compiled them into a book. And now it's like, does anybody want to buy this thing? And like, I hate trying to sell it. I'm just like, hey, if anybody wants it, here it is. But I'm like the worst salesman ever. And it makes me feel so painfully awkward to try to like ask people for money. Does that resonate at all?
It resonates, and what I would caution is, don't have a sincerity contest with yourself. Okay?
Yeah.
Like, because I would say to you, the intention with which you're doing this thing is what you bring forth, and therefore, if someone was to make you a meal in thanks, that would feel proper. Money feels weird because it's tied to bombs and all, and that stuff. Um, Great. Are you still? There was just an interruption there,
Yeah,
and
we're good.
and and yet, it is literally our currency of transit currently. So, you know, sometimes actually, I find so-called progressive artists really get into this like tangent all about their own righteousness, which is like, I don't really want to hear about that. There's lots of stuff that I like that's popular. There's lots of people I hang with who've been successful.
Yeah.
There's lots of people I don't, you
Yeah.
know. But it definitely resonates, and it's one of the things that I think is an important thing to dialogue about, because as the path gets narrower, as AI devours jobs, as is that a robot or a person singing to me? All this stuff. What does it come down to? It actually comes down to like the things that actually we feel good about doing and being. And right beside that, how we help others in their experience of time, you know? And so I can't wait to get that book. I'll buy I'll buy it, you
I'll
know.
show you a copy.
But it's kind of a good litmus is like, yeah, I like getting paid for doing things that are meaningful, that have been meaningful for me, and then that provide a good experience for others. And I think, with all of this crazy 1984 backward speak war is peace shit going on right now, like you can really kind of cut it between like, is what you're doing oppressing people, or in anyone's experience causing them to suffer, or is it improving their experience of time? Because we know when we're listening to music, when we're in love, when we're eating a great meal, when we're with friends, time goes really fast, right? When you're in prison, when you're worried about your doctor being strafed, when you don't know if you should enter a hospital, though you know you have to, whether it's because you're scared a bomb's going to fall on it or you can't afford to, time is another thing. And I think that all of this leads kind of existentially to like, yeah, put value on things that are worthwhile,
Yeah.
and whatever, as you well know, I'm sure if someone wants your book and they can't afford it, you're about to give it to them. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I
those
try to.
that can't afford it should pay, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, thank you for that. It made me feel a little better about it all because it's just so weird. And I'm very new to it, so that's a nice little message for me to carry away from today. But Chris, let's chat about a new tune, "At Peace." Tell me what you love about that one, because seeing it
Oh yeah.
live 2 times last week, when they finished playing it live in Toronto both nights last week, I looked at my friend next to me and I was just like, "Wow!" And he said, "I think that's a top five propaganda song for me of all
I
time."
think so too. I think so too. Okay, and my if I have any kind of treatise on that song, is they said at peace, not at comfort.
Mm,
And that is willfully confused. Peace and comfort, especially by status quo, especially by neoliberal right-wing Christianity, where it's like, oh yeah, peace is like it, it's the detail of expense and it comes at any cost or whatever. No, no, no. Peace is not comfortable. And the very kind of essence of that song of dis-ease, like like it's so beautiful because where is the peace? The peace is with the inner reckoning of decisions that have been hard. At the end of the day, maybe you didn't get rich making that decision, but you actually made a friend of yourself and you're able to be present for those who need you, right? As opposed to those other ways where you're going to divorce from yourself, you know? So I think like, you know, you look at a power structure and you can tuck yourself into it and be of service to this power structure, and some of your anxieties might be taken away. I don't think you're going to be peaceful if you challenge that power structure because you know it's oppressive. Then it's going to cause some shit, but you probably will experience a deeper sense of self, a deeper sense of worth, and a connectivity, like sponsored by that caring. You meet people. I mean, in music, it's like, for instance, during the Gas CD, part of the job was making sure that the content was ecumenical as possible, that it wasn't just a genre and it wasn't just a time. It was everything, because it was cross currents of those concerns and cares that we recognize from a distance, and we go, yeah, we're humans, we're alive. It's really metaphysical. Their shit is metaphysical, and it's deeply rewarding. I also love, there's an aspect of that, whether it's literally because they were reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead or not, but they basically talk about the Bardo state, where the dream about the place between life and death, where we reconvene.
Mm.
So in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that's what exists right after death, right? And the first job is not a lot of weeping and wailing. It's providing peace for the person in their passage. The second job is that soul in passage, which encounters, first they encounter like a seven-armed beast that is going to kill them. And if they fight, it'll kill them and they re-enter the womb, meaning they'll have to endure the exact same thing that they just went through. If they walk through it, they get to the next level, next monster, next beast. You don't fight, you walk through it, until you hit Mount Meru, which you could never scale, but you walk through it. And that thing that they're touching on in that dream is so close to that parable. And it's so, there's all kinds of things that are in that, like reckoning. You could call it revenge, but really it's an evening of the playing field. If we take away the props, if we take away the money, if we take away the safety of the power structure, what are you coming to me with? What have you done? Where do you stand? Because yeah. So I agree, that is a top five, and it hits so deeply.
Mm. Do you feel like they age well with you? Like every time they hit a new record,
Hugely.
like they're just a little bit ahead of me, right? In life, they're like 10 years older than I am. So they kind of give me a preview of stages of life that I'm moving into. And it really just messes with me a lot because they just go right, they're one step ahead of me in life, and it kind of helps me see some things that I might be facing in the future.
Yeah, well, I think I'm their age, and they help me see. So I think what they're doing, again, I will say it again, is high art.
Mm.
There's nothing snotty about that. It's the actual intention of being and creating. Silence and meditation also manifests the same way. They you know yes, I so in a sense it's ageless, and it's really amazing because they can talk about very date specific stuff like Coinal Pro, but the way that they're addressing it is in a metaphysical state. Like, it really is. They're not, it's not just like, I'm mad at you, you did this. It's like, I'm implicated in these crimes, one. Two, even the things that I enjoy are stuck to this. How do I abide? These are timeless questions. I mean, that was asked in the Old Testament, in like the Abraham and Isaac story about kill your kid. It's the same question, and that's why the art ages really well, because it's wrought from experience, and it's wrought from people who care. Like, and they're giving you this parable. They're giving you this thing of like, how am I going to get through this? You notice
Yeah.
there's questions in their songs. That is always a healthy thing,
Yeah.
not answers. Someone asked me, it was funny, like there was a quote unquote political artist that I was on a tour with, and someone said, "Oh, you must have really liked hanging with that dude." I was like, "Nope, I didn't. I did not," because all I heard about was who are the bad guys and who are the good guys, and he was definitely a good guy, you know, and there was no like I political art is useless to me unless I can locate myself in it.
Mm.
Unless I can actually be Hitler and understand my proclivities that would lead me to terrorize and oppress others, like whether it's animals or women or anybody in my care, or like I don't really need to hear who's awful and evil. Like I can read the paper and get editorial opinions all day. What they're doing is something different. They're implicating themselves. And like I said, they're offering a contemporary rite of passage that's really, really important right now, especially for young men. And I will note that their audience is, it was almost like 40% women too. That was awesome.
Excellent. How glad are you that you're on the Potemkin City Limits record? If you think about your life in music, how cool is that that you get to be on one of these albums where you're like describing it so vividly as high art, which I agree, propaganda is my favorite art that exists on planet Earth ever in the
Amazing.
history of
Yeah.
civilization. But how does that feel to be part of the story?
Well, it always feels like a great honor, and it always feels like some kind of keeping of some kind of promise that was quietly made to myself when I was a kid playing piano, you know, and all the things that delighted and moved me, and all the magic, and fortunately having a context where that magic was encouraged. So, and being able to nail the emotion of it, like um, I think playing on Potemkin City Limits for me is right up there with touring with BB King, and any number of like yeah, making a couple of the Rheostatics albums like Whale Music. That was a real charge, and that was a real time, and I'm bringing up those examples because they're different than when you're in the studio making your own art with your own band. That's known, you're like right at the mat, it's a different thing when you're brought in because you could be professional, let's say, and do something competent. I'd say in those instances, and hopefully educated by those instances, that's what I bring when I'm working with other people. I'm like brought in to the intention of that work, and I am mirroring it. Like I'm bringing something to it that reflects in it a different way. Like I have this feeling uh, that there's basically one soul, and we all have a very specific window on it, almost like a bee's eye that's got all those lenses in it. So we all have a very, very unique take. So, like for instance, the way propagandy sound is very particular to their experience and their perspective, and then the way Nina Simone sounds is hers, but you're looking at the same thing. So if you can kind of come into a context and maybe add something when it works, it's because you're focused on the same thing, but you're opening a different window, a different light on it, you know. And sometimes it feels like that for me with guitar bands because they don't normally have keys or whatever. And when you can hear what that happens texturally, yeah, it's a great thing to feel like that you're adding something.
So, Chris, there's one more thing that we chatted with a little bit briefly about via email because today you were coming back wanting when we were going to do this conversation, and you said that you were coming back from doing something in a prison. I'm just curious what else that you have going on in the community with regards to work with incarcerated people, because I know that John Sampson, formerly of Propaganda and the Weaker Thans, also does teaching in prisons and jails as well. So just tell me a little bit about what you got going on in that part of the world.
Yeah, a few years ago, the Harper government started dismantling the agricultural program in prisons, which had been running for 200 years in Canada and had a 0.1% recidivism rate,
Hmm.
meaning anybody who went through that program did not reoffend. So why would you destroy it?
Hmm.
Right. And things are on lockdown when you start messing with inmates because they're vulnerable people. They've done harm, right? So it's this perfect project of neocons where they're protecting the public, right? Like Harper was roaming the country with this DS that said "victims first" in cursive on it and parading traumatized families. Um, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think a benefit for sex offenders or murderers is going to work. Um, so I just decided to get in and start doing what I do, which is playing music. And so it started with just music workshop, which the first session was supposed to be 45 minutes. It ended up being 3 hours. And then I got the right, because we were doing a charitable work, I was asked to do something with the symphony. And I said, can I use inmates instead? And he said, yeah. And that's the first time we recorded.
Hmm.
13 years later, we build recording studios in prisons. We're now a national charity in Canada. And the works get released. It's called the Pros and Cons program. The works get released anonymously, tied to charitable works, usually associated in some way with the perpetrator's crimes. The inmates choose, where the focus and money goes. We've to date released 4 records, 2 from the women's prison in Grand Valley, 2 from Pittsburgh, Joyceville, and we're in 5 institutions, and we also bring in concerts like Tom Wilson played, Bill Frisell's played 2 concerts at Collins Bay Medium. Mentors come in, because it's professional mentorship of convicts. So then what happens is when folks graduate, when they get paroled or released, they come back in and mentor, because those people, where normally their incarceration is a liability, it's an asset when mentoring other people. And so the when those folks who've gone through the program come back in with me, they can do way more work than I can. And it's self-perpetuating. Like, fortunately, we had some of the studios built before COVID. So when we came back in these institutions, there'd be hundreds of tracks that they
Hmm.
will have worked on. And the goal is to put it in every institution in Canada. And I'm currently seeking a national director, but we had 3 years of funding from the David Rockefeller Fund, which was an amazing thing, because that's a fund that's very dedicated to restorative justice. I did a TED Talk about it, and it's called the Pros and Cons program. You can find it if you go to Wolf Island Records. It's one of the artists on Wolf Island Records is the Pros and Cons program.
Nice. And I'm also looking at the website, prosandconsprogram.com. And there's
That's it.
also a podcast that is associated with the program as well.
Amazing.
Looks like, because you guys have like 11 episodes out.
Yep.
Um, Amazing. So really cool. I'm going to put some links to this really cool project in the show notes so people can go and click right on it. But thanks for telling me a lot about that program too, because it's really awesome looking, and I think you're doing some cool work.
My pleasure, man. You can also link to the record I put out this year called Patch 'em 2, which is up there.
Chris, what a delight to hang out with you and get your story in relation to this amazing band that we both love. And since we've been sitting here, I actually Googled where Wolf Island is, and I'm amazed because I go up through Watertown quite a lot on my way to the Adirondacks in upstate New York.
Oh, good.
So I've actually been not too far away from where you live, and going across the bridge into Canada in the Thousand Island region is always one of the most biggest highlights of my travels whenever I go up that way. So it's pretty cool to see where you live too, because it's so gorgeous
Awesome.
up there.
Yeah, well, usually there's an American ferry that runs from Cape Vincent, so you can actually use it as a border crossing too. Right now, that ferry it was down this year, but hopefully by next it'll be up. But in any case, come. And Hotel Wolf Island is, as I said, it's like this combination restaurant, 4 venues, recording studio, like art space. So just like drop in. And also for anybody else out there, if you look at what's going on at Hotel Wolf Island or Wolf Island Records, you see all the music that gets made here. Um, and folks come from around the world to perform and do installations here and whatnot.
Amazing. Well, Chris Brown, thank you so much for joining me to chat about Propaganda, Potemkin City Limits, and much more. I really appreciate your time. And I didn't know about the Gas CD compilation, which is another piece of propaganda history that I now feel glad to have documented on the show. So thanks for bringing that up and joining me. It's been a great hang, man.
You're most welcome. It's been wonderful. And yeah, thanks for this time. It's been great.